Why don't we go ahead to the next community question then, shall we?
Yep. Our next.
Why are you laughing at my transition?
Charming formality to that. Shall we?
Shall.
Good.
Why don't we just ignore the ridiculousness of the last 8 minutes and just
Move on.
Try to be professional.
All
just
together.
pretend we didn't just edit out 15 minutes
Just you're making more to edit out.
Also, I made a popping sound when I said it.
It was wonderful.
with what?
Yeah. Oh, your
Oh,
mouth.
with your mouth.
Yeah.
We both said that.
I copied you.
You did.
I stayed half a second back so I can just
Enough.
Okay.
Okay. Jonas asks, generally speaking, do you think people's interests are remaining childish for longer than in past generations?
Jonas.
Are we all big children?
He's asking a board game company if we're remaining childish.
I mean, that's probably the right people to ask / accuse.
And I'm wondering, is he somebody who thinks that people are being childish, or is he someone who people are saying you're being childish? That's what I'm wondering.
Oh, so is he feeling insecure, or is he good old boying at us?
That's what I'm wondering.
This is a good question.
Because I'm feeling a little targeted. I think I am being. I think creativity. A lot of creativity could be considered childish, but I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to maintain this sense of play and wonder, as opposed to having goals that are maybe a little more dry and stable.
What I hear from the question is, I'm 50 years old and I like Legos and lightsabers and Spider-Man. Is that a
Did you read
childish
your bio?
thing that
Did
I'm...
you just read your bio?
My bio? Yeah, essentially.
But he just described so many adults.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know, full-grown humans that, play Pokemon and...
But the answer to the question, I think, for me is no. I think people don't change that much generation to generation. I think the circumstances and the environments change. But I think, for me, it's just nostalgia. And a lot of that nostalgia now, for me, is fueled by connection with my kids. So my girls love Star Wars and Legos and Marvel. And yes, that probably was influenced by me and my nostalgia, but now I get to share it with them, and that fuels it way more than had I not had, my daughters.
So even though it's toys and games, it's not childish because it has depth. It's about connection, and there's nothing childish about having connection and sharing experiences with people you love.
So let's go one level deeper, and I think, if I can articulate this, there is something wonderful about being childlike and how open the world is and how open our minds are to what's possible and where the joy is, as opposed to the responsibilities of taxes and payroll and money and relationships and all these things that are hard. Whereas as a child, you can just go what am I going to do to laugh today? Where am I going to find the joy? And I wish people would be more childish.
Yeah, is it childish versus childlike? Because I feel like
Interesting.
childish has a negative connotation. It's immature. It's childish. It's useless. That's what I think of with childish. But childlike is this does not have that same connotation, at least to me. I mean, with this sense of wonder and joy. And I think it is important. It's so important to maintain and harness and come back to that childlike nature, as opposed to, shun it and try to move away from things that feel childish.
Occasionally I meet in my network with a lot of executives from other industries, and it comes to me and I tell them what I do. And, it's almost like I draw pictures all day and I make games and stuff like that. And it does feel childish in the room. And I feel this need to justify what I do to them. At least I have in the past. I'm becoming a lot less so. I don't have to wear a tie every day. I don't have to, there is a perception, I think, and there is a big difference between the two words. You're right. Childlike is a wonderful thing, and childish almost is like an immature,
Yes.
right? The lack of maturity or lack of restraint or something like that. And you're right. But I have felt that working in pop culture, games and books and toys, and people have, a lot of people have no idea how much actual adulting it takes to bring this stuff into the world. It's crazy. It's not a ride a lot of people would want to take. That being said, there is something childlike about it, which is, I think, why I engage with it.
Yeah, generally speaking, I completely agree on this. I think that what changes is the culture, but I think people normally, just as part of the human experience, like as we grow older, we reach back for the comforts of the things that we experienced and engaged with when we were kids. And I think that that changes over time. You know, like I think that, you know, when my grandparents were young, they had like dime Western books and all these little Pulp Fiction things. And then as they grew older, you know, my grandparents enjoyed Westerns. I don't think any of them would have said this is a childish thing to like. And I think it's very similar when someone today enjoys Star Wars. You know, it's not that Star Wars is a childish thing or not. It's just a more, like, we have a more mature relationship with the things that we loved in our childhood. And I think that that is just a reflection of us trying to hang on to something pure and good. And I think humanity always does that. It just looks different in different contexts, in different eras.
Yeah, my dad died recently, and he was 79 years old. And what he would do for the last probably couple years as he was getting worse and worse in his physical condition is he would just watch old Western movies from like the 50s. And, you know, he was born in 1940, so that means he was like a teenager in those years. And it was very clear to me that he was trying to connect with the happier, more joyous days of his life, and the nostalgia was very strong. And I think to myself, it's the same thing with when I saw Star Wars in the theater when it came out in 1977, because I'm old. And
My mom saw it 17 times when it was in the movie theater. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Dedicated.
Yeah, I was 6, but I have visceral moments of nostalgia when I hear a certain piece of John Williams music from that time, and I transport myself back then. It doesn't even matter if I watch it now. It's where I was at the time, and some of those feelings that are hard to replicate now that I was feeling when I was 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. Like, that stuff is just cherished. People cherish those wonderful moments that they can't get back, you know, because they're so rare, and there's a distance that you have to it. And so when I think about the childlike word, I think we all kind of, well, for the most part, I think a lot of people share that. Not everybody has a wonderful childhood, and they kind of want out of it, and I understand that too. That's important. But childish is something you try to get over as you become an adult and you learn to be responsible. But childlike is something I will fight for.
I do wonder if, you know, as the question was specifically around generations, you know, is this generation more childish? Or I'm just going to replace it with childlike for this. Is it more childlike than other generations? And I do think if you're looking at, like, we'll take millennials versus Gen Xers. Millennials, you ask them what their jobs are. We have such a different plethora of available activities that we can do to make money than there was in generations past, from the internet and our ability to work remotely and make money on social media. And so I do think there is a bit more childlike nature that's being preserved in this generation, as we're not having to fit into quite such a rigid social structure in order to survive financially.